If they get the chance, they were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run underground, given room to breathe, not be drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been left this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. Seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me.
Hello everybody, good evening, welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby Blog. I am Cammy Black. We've got a packed show for you this evening. There's been some international rugby, which is always good to have a wee chat about, and we've got a special guest with us, as some of you may see, and we'll come to that in a minute. So at the moment we're live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter and Twitch. If you're watching live, please get involved in the comments and we'll pick out the best to read out as the night goes on. I'm joined this evening. We have John Anderson. Good evening, John.
Good evening.
We've got Ian here. Good evening, Ian.
Hello.
And we've got Craig Manson as well. Good evening, Craig.
Good evening.
You can get in touch with us, podcast at scottishrugbyblog.co.uk on the email. You can go to the blog scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. We're on Twitter at scottrugbyblog or at scottrugbypod. We're also now on TikTok, which I might discuss in the Patreon-only podcast we'll do later on, because that's utterly warped me now, and I've discovered things that a 40-year-old man just shouldn't discover. We might talk about that later on. Speaking of which, we do an extra bonus podcast just for our Patreons every week, where we kind of talk about things that have annoyed us in our Hands in the Ruck section. So you can sign up to that for £3 a month, £5 if you want to get in this exclusive Dougie Donnelly Lounge. So that is patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast, and you can get extra bonus content through there. We're going to start this evening. We've got a very special guest with us. We've got Dave Algie from the Raeburn and Utrecht Shield. Good evening, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Now, lots of you probably have seen, because the Raeburn, it's picking up a lot of steam this, Dave, on particularly on Twitter, the Raeburn and Utrecht Shield. It's a bit, I suppose, like I think on the website you describe it as a boxing belt. I think we would probably say like WWE belt. Would be more in certainly Ian's wheelhouse there.
I was going to say it's like when Tyson Fury was going on about how he's the lineal champ.
Yeah,
because he got his title stripped even though he'd beaten Klitschko and all that. Yeah, so I'd say it's more like that.
But this, Dave, just explain this to us. So this is a kind of an idea for a new kind of rugby trophy that traces the winningest team back to the very first international at Raeburn Place.
Yeah. So it doesn't exist right now, though the reality or what it tracks does. So if you just take the first international match, it was in 1871 between Scotland and England. It's played at Raeburn Place. And Scotland won, so they're your champ, and which is probably quite good news to you guys. And then you trace it from there. So they got beaten the following year by England, and England took it off of them. It was named after that first game, so it's the Raeburn Shield. Utrecht Shield follows the women's game, which was 1982. First match was in Utrecht, but you trace it through all that time. The Raeburn Shield now has changed hands over 200 times, and there's some really interesting bits that you see. Where we were talking about it before we went on air, Romania held it in the mid-80s, which is unimaginable to have Romania holding a world rugby title, but they have.
We should just mention the reason that Romania won it though was because they lost it to Scotland. Scotland lost it to Romania, I should say, in the 80s. We might kind of feel like having read up on Romanian rugby in the 80s, and now want to do a bonus podcast. Just talking about communism and rugby in the 80s in Romania.
Do we need to bring it back for a stronger Romanian team?
I think so. Yeah, I mean that seems to be the way to go is to get a ruthless communist dictator who's willing to bankroll rugby by kind of giving all the flankers jobs as bodyguards in his own personal army. That seems to be the way. It
hasn't worked for the Russian national team as yet. So nice.
Well, we'll see. So yeah, but it isn't like you said, David. So how many teams have won it in total then over that time?
So you've got quite a few teams. I think it comes through to 12 now. And you're looking at some teams you wouldn't expect. So Romania, but Samoa have held it as well, Japan. But I think the greatest thing about it is that you don't quite know where it's going next. So I'm a Kiwi. I live in England now, but this year I really hoped that New Zealand were going to get a shot at it because the Springboks held it at the start of the year. They won it during the World Cup. And I was like, surely they're going to keep it until they meet us in the Rugby Championship. But they lost it to Australia, who continue to hold it. They've got 5 games in a row. So I'm sitting over here. The All Blacks haven't held it since 2018, going, come on, man. I run the Shield. And it's just me. There's no big company behind it or anything. I just believe. So that's the kind of fun of it. And, of course, you've got this, international prize, which doesn't need any additional fixtures. So where there's all these issues of how we're going to fit in extra games, well, there's none of that with the Raeburn and the Utrecht Shield because it just goes along with what you've got coming. And if you imagine that you're an All Black right now and you might have 2-3 years in the team, you haven't got a shot. You haven't even got a chance to play for the Raeburn Shield if you knew about it. You'd be itching. When the time comes, you'd be well up for it. Same with your Scottish boys. They last held it in 2018. They took it off of England in the Six Nations. They lost it the next week to the Irish, but I think
2 weeks. We held it, Dave. 14 days. It was 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. There you go. So let's not do the matches. Actually, we want to go by days. The Springboks are the champs. They held it through both world wars. They you don't want the Springboks to hold the Shield because you'll get a world war or a pandemic. That seems to be how it works.
I was going to say there wasn't. Thankfully, someone won it off them before they had stopped playing rugby in the 80s because of the issue.
Yeah, could have been a long time.
Yeah,
no, absolutely. So it's that thing of you kind of as a player, if they knew about it, if they understood it, there's that excitement. I think for Kiwis, it's a bit more, they make that connect because we've got something called the Ranfurly Shield in New Zealand that's played in our provincial game. And that you have to defend only when you're away, whereas the Raeburn Shield, if you're playing, you're defending. But that connect and that excitement and that passion links in. And so all I want to do is get the fans on board. And then in the long term, World Rugby will have no choice but to recognise it. So we'll start with the fans and World Rugby can follow.
And you're here tonight because obviously we're up against the holders at the weekend, Australia. John, I mean, that's quite exciting to kind of have. I think there's some kind of made up trophy that we play Australia for. I can't remember what it is. There's is it like a vase? It's like a vase we play them for.
Do you know, we make up trophies for all these fixtures these days, and it's actually nice to have a concept for a made up trophy. I like the idea of having a concept to be like, all right, so that's what it's actually for, and I think fans will get on board with that much more than the usual. What was I always remember the England Autumn Internationals a few years ago, and it was the Pilter Cup or something nonsense, and it was like named after a blooming insurance company, and you're like, that means nothing, and they're holding it like, "Way, we won a trophy, yay!" Jog on, guys.
Yeah.
Let's get a proper cup to play for.
It's the Hopton Cup.
Hopton Cup, yeah, and it looks like something that you'd put your nan's ashes in. Hopton Cup. It's like a small glass thing with a lid on.
Imagine if you guys win this weekend, you can legitimately say that you're at the end of a line of winners from the birth of the international game.
Yeah,
like,
and
legitimately.
That's what's nice about it. Yeah.
But then we're probably going to lose it to the South Africans.
I think it would be more Scottish to lose it to Japan.
Yeah.
That'd be better, yeah. That would be good.
Who then don't have, and I checked this, Japan then don't have any fixtures set up post the autumn. So it could Japan could hold it till the World Cup the way things are going.
Well, because Springboks didn't play after the World Cup for basically 2 years. So I was sat there twiddling my thumbs. And same with the Black Ferns, who held the Utrecht Shield. So for 2 years, I was like, I don't have much content to talk about here. It's really tricky. So I've got to be honest, if it goes to the Six Nations, that would probably be quite handy for me, Yeah,
it was saying on the site that the Springboks had held it for 694 days over the pandemic since the World Cup. It was like, I mean, surely, based on Ian's Tyson Fury thing, surely there's like a mandatory period, and then you have to renounce your title. If you don't take the challenge.
Shield.
I think it was 7 years during World War II, so they've certainly run it long before.
I think that's, to be fair, that's a legitimate reason for not organising an international game of rugby. To be fair, so Dave, this is only kind of capped internationals. So we're not looking at a prospect where back in the day this could have been lost to Munster or South to Scotland if one of these teams turn up.
And British and Irish Lions can't win it either. So the way I always describe it is, if you could qualify for a Rugby World Cup, you can qualify to win the Raeburn Shield or the Utrecht Shield. And that's because it's kind of the same idea. It's all about that national competition.
Yeah, and the last time it was won by, I think Japan have had it a fair few times now, have they? And then
they have. I'm just having a look back to see when their kind of dates, because actually. Sorry, I don't have it to hand, but Japan definitely held it during the Rugby World Cup, and they also had it in 2013. I think they took it off of Wales, who were on tour.
They did indeed. 2013.
It was still a capped international, so it counted, but Wales were shy of a few players.
Samoa won it again, and this is the great thing, because then you can tie it to these great fixtures, because there's that great fixture between Samoa and Wales in the '99 World Cup. So then World Cup, yeah, that's right. So and Samoa won it. We won it. We then took it back from Samoa, and then we promptly lost it to New Zealand within the space of the World Cup.
It does go on a journey sometimes at the Rugby World Cups. But that's actually the nice thing, is it often comes together with the Rugby World Cup. And so, people are often going, oh, you've got your world champs. And like, your world champions are always your world champions. The Springboks remain the world champions. But they've sort of lost their title, if you like, of best team. And so I like to think that you earn it and you hold the Raeburn Shield alongside the Rugby World Cup. And then when you lose that kind of flitters away and you're still the world champ or holders, but,
Presumably, though, I mean, you could, I'm just thinking, in theory, if you won your last game at a Rugby World Cup but finished third in your group, which, is not unfamiliar territory for someone like Scotland, you then potentially it becomes a separate thing for the World Cup as well. I mean...
Well, it very nearly happened, actually. Japan's last group match in the last World Cup, very nearly they lost it and still... it was real tight. You can imagine, I was sitting there going, oh, come on, just make it out of the group, come on. Because I didn't care about the teams, I just wanted the Shield to go further.
That wasn't a commonly shared sentiment here, by the way.
I'm sorry, lads, I'm sorry. Bigger priorities over here.
So the other side of this is obviously we've got, and that's the big draw for us this weekend. Obviously, we're fighting for the Utrecht Shield. Raeburn Shield. Sorry, the reason I've got Utrecht on the mic, that's my next question. The Utrecht Shield, then, which is the women's equivalent. Now, that was interesting to me that the first international women's game of rugby was only in 1984 in
really recent.
Was it Netherlands versus France in Utrecht?
Yeah, Yeah. So Netherlands and France. France actually won it, and they bounced it back and forth a few times. But yeah, I mean, the Netherlands, I think they did manage to get it eventually. They got it in 1986, I think it was. But the women's game is so much more recent. So, I look at it sometimes. I put together stats for things, and it's a lot easier on the Utrecht Shield because there's a lot less data versus the Raeburn Shield. But it's really nice and it's interesting. England and the Black Ferns dominate, not massively surprisingly. And of course, I don't know if you saw the Black Ferns last weekend. It was only the 100th Test match, and England's captain already has 100 tests. So it's really interesting. England dominate, but the Black Ferns still held it for like 8 years at one point. It was just that they played not very many games at that point. They used to turn up to World Cups, smash a few heads together, and disappear into the sunset for a while.
Yeah, it was interesting because actually, I was interested to see that Scotland hadn't held the Utrecht Shield, and actually Scotland were pretty decent in the 90s, particularly the Scottish women's team. But it's like you say, actually, when you look at the 90s fixtures, it kind of spent quite a bit of time in the Southern Hemisphere, so that's the interesting thing. These shields don't get that much of a chance to.
Yeah. You can imagine as a player, if you knew about it, that's my aim, is so that the players know. Then that moment, it's a bit like the Lions. There's that rarity to it. You don't know if you're going to get your shot. So when you do, you just got to take it.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to me because I love World Cups. I love them. I think rugby's at its best when every nation competes for the same prize. But we've got this 4-year period in between where it's fun, and we're always looking for how do we cross over the nations. Well, this is it. And it'll have a bit of randomness to it. You don't know when you'll get your shot, but when you do, you need to take it because you might not get another shot for a while. And I loved it during the Rugby Championship. I pretend I'm neutral, but I'm not. I'm an All Black fan. So I was sat there going, come on, just make it to the All Black game. We'll take it back. But it missed us, and so I had a real buy-in to other matches because I wanted to see if it would make it to us. And so I've started putting together, you'll see on Twitter, if you follow the Twitter page, a kind of layout so you can see where the shield might go. So right now there's 6 different teams that could conceivably hold it by Christmas. And actually it's really interesting looking at kind of who all of they are. The Wallabies obviously are there. You guys have got it. And then if you win it, you've got to defend it against South Africa and then Japan, and so it's all of that kind of permutations for how you can get a shot. Yeah. If I'm a Welsh fan, I could get it,
Yeah. I mean, it's good, Craig, isn't it? Because I suppose it celebrates the kind of the uniqueness of Test rugby, doesn't it? Because rugby's different to other sports in that we have these one-off tests, but to then add this into it that could come along once in a while.
I think that's the big thing. Is that we all we're about to discuss it fairly in a fair amount of detail about how people are incensed by games being played outside the international window and blah, this and that and the other, and these games are kind of not the best game. You're not going to enjoy this, but having something like that is really interesting, and it gets buy-in from the fans. And as we know, we're always looking for the buy-in from the fans to get as much coverage and as much get rugby out to as many people as it possibly can.
Yeah. Well, Dave, we're very excited here. We'll be following with interest. Obviously, as soon as it dips away, once we'll see how the weekend goes.
Yeah.
I was fairly optimistic, but yeah.
I say good luck, but I mean, if you then take it and lose it to Japan, I will be pissed. I'll be happy for Japan, but guys, I need this thing in circulation, so help each other out.
Well, one of our fans has said it would be Peak Scotland would be winning on the Saturday, followed by winning through to the Six Nations, only to then lose the Raeburn Shield and Grand Slam bid to Italy, captained by an emergency returning Parisi. That's the level of optimism Scotland fans work on.
But if there's one person who deserves, if there's somebody who deserves an international trophy, probably it's Sergio Parisi.
I mean, would you actually get see if Parisi in Italy won it? Would you actually mail them a shield?
That would actually you'd have to go down. I'd go down the locksmith and see what he's got behind the counter. One of those plastic.
Get him one of those wee ones that you get for the
V5 aside ones.
Yeah.
Get a massive replica made and carry him out on it.
captain, my
Come
captain.
back with your shoes on it.
Well, listen, Dave, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you all the best with that. We'll support this. I think it's a great idea, and hopefully it'll get some legs and we can get some momentum behind it and become a thing. But thank you very much for joining us, Dave, and we wish you the best with it.
Thanks,
Dave.
It's a real pleasure.
Cheers,
and
bye.
As I say,
Dave.
good luck, but make sure you don't screw it up.
Yeah. Well, on that note, thanks, Dave. We'll see you again soon.
Right.
Bye.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers, Dave.
So the Raeburn Shield, then that was interesting.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool, yeah.
Scotland have only ever managed to successfully defend it twice in a row. Just as an aside, so we are not.
We've lost it to Romania and and I will just say I looked up that team, and this is the lineup. The Scotland's lineup on the day. They had David Leslie, Jim Aiken, Alan Tomes, Roy Laidlaw, John Beattie. Who else did they have in there? Peter Dodds, Jim Rennick, Keith Robertson, and John Rutherford. So it wasn't a terrible side.
It's not a scratch team, is it? It's a really good side.
But they were away to Romania in 1984.
Basically, Ceausescu just ploughed his entire budget into rugby union to try and make them successful as a massive propaganda machine, and employed all of his rugby players as bodyguards. and then basically what did for Romanian rugby was that as soon as the kind of proper international rugby comes along in the World Cup, right? That coincides with the revolution in Romania. And everyone just so the entire country just kind of pushes back against rugby union because it's been seen as the
establishment sport.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the greatest ever flanker was shot dead in friendly fire because someone mistook him for a terrorist, even though he was the bodyguard for the president.
Wow.
Was it a Georgian player that got shot by somebody from the union a couple of years ago?
That was someone walked into the Georgian Rugby Union headquarters. That was just before they played us, before the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup qualifier. It was a former player, I think, on a contract issue, but yeah. But Georgia are similar, I think, because they're bankrolled by the president.
They are, yes. They are. Very much so.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. People don't like us talking politics in this podcast. Maybe they like, well, anyway. Let's talk about Scotland Tonga. We'll do a proper preview of Australia. Scotland once the teams are out in our OnlyFins podcast. Probably Friday lunchtime. We think we'll see how the teams go. We're hoping to try and get a couple of guys from an Australian rugby podcast on with us as well, so that'll be interesting. We'll come on to the players in a minute. John, I'll start with you. It was a scratch Tongan side. I mean, how much can we read into this game? It felt like a training match, if we're honest.
Yes. Yeah. At times, it looked like a training match against. I mean, you would probably argue, even if you were having a training match internally, some of the fitness levels of some of the Tongan players, given the lack of preparation they've had, lack of coaching they've had. I'm not criticising. I'm just saying that the level wasn't up to international rugby level. The guys breathing very heavily after 20 minutes, and the last person I've seen do that was Ross Ford over in Japan. So just gotta get a wee dig in there. There's not much we can take from it. Now, what we can take from it is there was a level of physicality involved from the Tongan side, which it's good that the Scotland boys have been exposed to that. It will certainly have jogged a few for those who maybe haven't had as much rugby this season as they could have. That will certainly have reminded them of the physicality of international rugby, and that will not be a bad thing. But overall, I mean, I enjoyed the game, but I don't think we can take anything from it.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, you got pelters off somebody for alleging that the Tongan players had innate ability, which I think your point was that, despite the fact they had no prep time and their coach was missing because he'd been assaulted, they're still very good players.
Yeah, because the Islanders, they're not exactly born with a rugby ball in their hand, but they start playing very quickly. So they have skills. All right, they're not maybe innate wasn't the right word, but they learn from a very young age to play rugby. And, because they didn't have that cohesion, they were easy to deal with, but they still looked threatening. That opening few minutes, certainly, they caused real problems. And like John said, they pride themselves on their physicality and their pace. And they did show that. And like I said, they did cause us a wee scare here and there. But the lack of fitness, lack of prep made it a walkover in the end. But it was good for Scotland to get some of the young guys out. Especially, Jamie Hodgson seemed to be calling the lineouts, and I thought he did exceptionally well in that regard. So it's probably good to get that first cap under their belt, and so they can be right. That's me exposed. I've played in front of, what was it, 40,000 people I think were there at the weekend.
30 odd.
Mm-hmm. So which is a bigger crowd probably than they've ever played in front of before. So that's worthwhile, and also good to get some combos going. Sam Johnson and Tui Pilotu. I very much doubt they'll start next week, but if something happens to Chris Harris, they play together at Glasgow, but they haven't had a lot of time there together, so just that extra few minutes helps.
Yeah, I suppose the worry for me, Craig, is watching. I'm not sure that Scotland are going to get that as much time on the ball as they had in terms of a defence coming at them as they got against Tonga, because there were a couple of times where the pressure was on, but there was a lot of thinking time when the ball was coming out of the base of the ruck, and that you're not going to get that against an Australia or a South Africa.
Absolutely not. We were talking earlier, and I was posting on Twitter as well, and it just, for me, if you're looking at, we were talking about the forwards and who stood out in the forwards, and it was quite difficult to Mish had a really quiet game, but then the front row had a good game, but a quiet game. Xander Ferguson was quiet as well, and it was all because we didn't actually use the forwards that much because we had so much time in the backs. The backs could do what they needed to do and go through, but it looked very much. This is going to sound really against Tonga because they gave us a huge amount. They gave us a couple of scares, but you could see it almost like a training run, like a team run. And they were going through all the processes, etc. And it was difficult. They get something out of it, but I don't think Scotland got that much out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose because Mish got 40 minutes. Got 40 minutes subbed at half time. It's the first time he played since the Lions tour, so he got one turnover. But he's probably going to compete. I would be, against Australia or South Africa, if he starts, he's going to be competing a hell of a lot more for the ball than he did against Tonga, John.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the turnover he got was in that period that Ian pointed out at the start of the game, where we maybe coughed up possession a bit too easily and put ourselves under a hell of a lot of pressure in our own kind of 22. And Mish sort of just came out and was like, all right, cool, well, I'll sort this out for his boys, and got over the ball. I think the type of physicality that Tonga were bringing at the breakdown, it wasn't technical, but it was certainly, there was a lot of brute force, and I do wonder if there was an element of, particularly as Mish is going to be key over the next few weeks, it's a case of because we know how easy it is just to twist a wee ankle in those breakdowns or just cause yourself a wee bit of harm. Just take him out the road for a bit, and he's had his blowout, he's had his 40 minutes, but he'll be absolutely crucial, particularly against Australia. I think the way they play, the battle with him and Hooper is going to be absolutely key.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the forwards then. I think we've mentioned Jamie Hodgson there, and I saw someone on Twitter was saying he's had 26 caps for Edinburgh, but as much as I watch Edinburgh, I noticed them doing an awful lot, but I think sometimes locks, they're not required to do an awful lot, apart from just kind of lumber around the park and jump for the line-out ball occasionally. Do you know what I mean? It's not, they don't necessarily get through a lot of noticeable work, but he was noticeable, I think, against Tonga, but not just in the line-out, which he was calling, but I thought in the maul, he was particularly effective because he was the guy in the middle of it, standing there, pulling guys in, and that was, and defensively as well. He was the guy stood up in the middle, kind of dragging Tongan players into it, and it's something that we've seen Scott Cummings start to do a little bit. So I suppose it was good to see that we've got that option now. We've got another young lot coming through that can kind of compete with Scott Cummings. There's a bit more depth, Craig.
Yeah, he definitely. Well, he's been taught well by no matter what people say about him, or people will maybe disagree a little bit. But Grant Gilchrist is a phenomenal line-out and set-piece worker on the field, and he's been working with Grant Gilchrist for a little while with Edinburgh, and he actually was doing the Grant Gilchrist job. In the Tonga game, so your line out control, calling your line out, then you're controlling the maul, calling players in which side they're going, pulling them around, etc. So I think, but where I like him a little bit more than Grant Gilchrist is he's go forward as well when he's got the ball. He's got quite a lot of movement and open play. So I think, dare I say it, a Cummings. Him in partnership with Scott Cummings would be quite an exciting second row locks,
Yeah, because it wasn't just the kind of attacking that he got through. He got through a hell of a lot of work in defence as well, Ian. I mean, I tried to look. I managed to find some stats on the autumn series website, which is quite good that they do them because it's quite hard to find these sometimes. But I think we find his tackles made. I think he was so 11 tackles and none missed. Which again, it's good. That's kind of for a game like this. That's Johnny Gray levels of tackles, given that we were in possession most of the time.
Yeah, I was about to say, seeing as Tonga, I didn't see a lot of ball. That's a decent work rate. But one thing I will say about Jamie Hodgson is, where did he cut his cloth? Super 6. So yes, it is doing its job. No, he certainly seems a talent, and like Jake was saying, him and Cummings, we are seeing these more mobile locks now. Your James Ryan's, and I can't mind the other Leinster boy that's come through. Ryan Baird, is that his? I can't remember. There's one of them that's dead fast. Absolutely skinned the Warriors a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think there's definite potential there. He's 23 now. And, if he's learning off Grant Gilchrist and also Ben Toulis, who I've not been the biggest fan of, but he's a damn good line-out operator. If he's learning set pieces off these guys, he's just going to get better and better. And then, if you add in athleticism to that, he could be a star in the making. But well, the fact that we're missing a few folk, he might end up being, he might start on Sunday, or he can certainly be cover on the bench.
Yeah. Pierre Schumann, John, I think, I don't think it was beyond a doubt that he was going to be up to standard against a team like Tonga, but, he quietly got about his work, I would say. It was a quiet but effective debut, but maybe sometimes that's what you need off your debut. You don't, it's a way of easing yourself in, dipping a toe in the water of international rugby.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely fair. I think sometimes we've seen, if we think back at the echelons of Scottish debuts, we've not necessarily seen that many steady, unspectacular but steady debuts. And I think, he done what he does. Scrum was pretty solid. Again, you can't really take much away from it, but he got about some work. He got his try, obviously. It was a couple of decent carries. I mean, he done everything you would expect to see from Pierre Schumann. And I think, certainly the team, Sutherland obviously being, we've not covered it yet, but Sutherland obviously is a way back to the fake Warriors to rest up, having he's got an injury. So Schumann will be first choice now, and I've got no problem with that. And I think it'll do him good. He'll find his feet against three very decent sides coming up, and let's see. I think we're all confident he's international class, but proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
I think you're doing him a slight disservice.
I was just about. I was going to interrupt you, Ian, but I'm glad you.
I could see Craig's face
I
twisting
remember
slowly.
there was one really big carry in the first half and one in the second just before he went off. You know, of all the forwards, except like Craig was saying, you know, Xander was quiet. And when I was watching it back today, I was like, yeah, Xander's not really well in terms of, you know, we use him quite a lot, sort of close quarters. It seemed to be Schumann taking the lead on that, and he made a couple of big thumping hits, and you know, this was through big lads. So I think it was an impressive debut rather than.
I'd also sorry, carry on, Ian.
No, I was just going to say, you know, it's impressive rather than just sort of quiet, sort of, you know, certainly above average, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess that's what I'm getting. I wasn't saying I wasn't saying that he did badly or anything. It was just it was an effective debut. I guess is what I'm saying. He did some carries. He did some. He put in some big hits. He took his try extremely well to get his body in that position. It was efficient. That's all I'm saying. Do you know? It wasn't like kind of he didn't get on there, and it's hard, I suppose, for a prop. You know, a prop's never going to come on and set the heather light, are they? But
well, I think you obviously haven't seen me come on the field, to be perfectly honest. To be fair, I think if it's your debut in front of a crowd for an international team, and you take away your first try on your first debut, I think it's an impressive start.
Yeah.
What I would say is Pierre Schumann, am I right in saying, gave no penalties away?
Nope.
Within the game as well, which is impressive again, considering he's usually between 6 and 8 penalties a game, and when he plays Raeburn, that's I'm being disingenuous here, because he will give a pick up. You know, it's usually a scrum penalty or something like that, with just depending on who he's up against. But no, I would say he was one. You know, if we're looking at the standout players, and I'm sure we'll talk about the backs, etc., but he was one of the standout players I felt on the day. I think out of a quiet forward pack, Hodgson, Schumann, Jamie Ritchie all had impressive games, and I think you know, I'm not trying to just. I'm not disagreeing with you just because I'm disagreeing with you and you're Glasgow and I'm Edinburgh. I just disagree with you. I think you know, being a prop, I was quite impressed by him. Plus, you know, obviously I love him a bit.
Do you still have the stats there, Cammy? How many scrums was there?
Scrums. Let me go. Let's go to the map. Team one.
Scotland didn't make a handle on error until like the 30th minute or something like
that. I think the scrum stats are one of these ones where everyone won the road. I mean, the scrums were good. Where we go? I'll find the right open play. I'll tell you something. They're a nightmare to read the stats. Set piece, scrum one. Well, this is the problem with scrums, right? Is that it shows that 100% of scrums won, but the Tonga conceded 2 scrum penalties.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the fact that the 2 penalties were, you know, there were 2 penalties conceded is a good sign. They'll come up against sterner tests, and that's. I know people will be upset that we're going to say it's only Tonga, but I think we have to say it's only Tonga, and it's only a Tongan side, like we've already mentioned, who didn't have their best players there. We're a pretty much scratch side with a thrown together coaching team, and we have to take that into account.
The replacement hooker arrived on the Thursday night and then had to come on in 29 minutes and had to play.
It's the top Tonga Barbarians second 15.
I mean, like I know it does sound harsh to say it's only Tonga, but we're not actually saying it's only Tonga. We're saying it is a severely depleted, severely handicapped Tonga that we come up against. They had players turning up like the night before the captain's run and being put on the bench and then having to play most of the game. It's not harsh to say that we should be pumping 60 points past a team like that, because we are a very well-drilled team. We've had our players in camp for, you know, weeks on end.
Yeah.
There's no disrespect there. It's fact.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know, like I said, I think Pierre Schumann had a good game. I'm not saying he didn't. it just maybe wasn't spectacular, but that's fine. That's what you. Well, I think that's what you need in your national day. He's got to try, like you said, Craig. He did a couple of big carries. That's great that he did that. Elsewhere in the pod, well, Jamie Ritchie was exceptional.
Jamie Ritchie was superb.
As always.
Superb.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
oh,
I
magnificent.
really
that
like
offload. Oh, filth. Filth.
Oh,
He's still my beating heart.
I don't know. You'd find.
hashtag.
I tell you what. Back in my day, you'd find that offload down the back of a bush down some railway sidings. It was so filthy.
If you're in the video shop, you're having to go through a curtain. You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll have to take the plastic off the cover.
What really impressed me was his communication with the referee.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it works for Jamie Ritchie because I think some of the things in the past he's suffered with is losing the head.
Yeah.
When he's focused and he's we all know the punch when he got actually smashed in the face against France for winding up his opposition number and getting them red carded. But there have been times when Jamie Ritchie's lost it, so to speak, and has maybe overplayed a little bit. And I think the captain's role suits him in that regard because the way he was talking to the referee was very mature, level-headed. He was asking questions. He wasn't accusing. His tone was really neutral, and he was getting a lot back. And I know it's Nick Berry and South Africans have got their views about Nick Berry, Craig, but that was a very mature captain's performance, particularly with regards to the way he managed the referee.
Yeah, and it shows. And this, I was going to say this is no disrespect to Stuart Hogg, but I guess it's probably going to sound like it. It shows having someone within the forwards being captain is a very handy, very comfortable thing to do. What I would say is just as I've always loved a bit of Jamie Ritchie. He's a bit like Xander, where he likes a bit of niggle, and he looks as dangerous as he looks dangerous when he's got his gander up and he's wanting a bit of niggle, but actually, just as you say, it suited him, the captaincy or the or the co-captaincy, and I think he wanted to perform and pull the team forward on Saturday, and it showed. And I was really impressed with him. Really impressed with him.
Yeah. Anybody else from the forwards, John, from you that stand out, or the bench?
I would just give big kudos to Nick Haining for coming on at outside centre and doing all right. I thought he took his try very well for a guy who again hasn't played any rugby this season, I don't believe. So came on and done his thing.
Jamie Lyle said in commentary it was his first game since March, which I take to be the victory over France.
So
Nick Haney was a funny one because again that felt like the kind of performance that I thought he carried really well. He took his try well. I think Nick Haining has the potential to be a very good 8 for Scotland. But it's about consistency. That first Ireland game he played, he was superb in that game. I think that France game again, you mentioned the last game he played. Again, I thought he was superb in that game. There's been a couple of games though, I think, where he's maybe been a bit quiet or subdued, and I just wonder whether or not there's a bit of a Chris Harris effect going on here that actually Nick Haining might have found his feet in international rugby.
Yeah, I think as well. He's behind Bill Mata in the pecking order for his preferred position. So maybe with a better run of games, he could maybe find a bit more consistency. If we only really see him in internationals, you just drop him in. You're kind of waiting to see what happens. But he has usually performed pretty well. I think there was a game against Italy in the Autumn Nations Cup. He wasn't very good. Like you said, he was quiet, but so far he's not really let us down. But it is about getting, if he could, not that I'd wish injury on no Mata or anything, but if he could somehow get ahead of Bill Mata, who is an incredibly good player, and show that, yes, he deserves that jersey over Matt Fagerson, it would be an interesting tussle.
I suppose that's the thing, though, Craig. We haven't settled on an 8 yet as Scotland. I know Matt Ferguson's probably the guy in possession of the jersey, and although, again, he was somebody that you look back at the stats, had a hell of a game without necessarily looking like he was having a hell of a game at the time. I think he was kind of top the stats for dominant tackles and probably put in some big hits and big carries. I can't decide whether or not we're struggling to find someone to fit an 8 jersey, or it's just that we've got so many options, it's hard to settle on someone.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think that there's a mixture of two things. Obviously, apart from the noise from the West Coast about Ferguson and the number 8, and he's the 8th of choice, and how dare we ever consider anybody else? He's ruthlessly efficient. He is, he comes onto the pitch and he plays his game. And no matter whether it's a Glasgow Warriors game or whether it's a Scotland game, he will do exactly the same thing. He'll come out and give it everything. And just as you say, Cammy, if you actually look at his stats, he's actually doing a fairly decent job. I'm underplaying him, Ian and John. He is doing a very, very good job, and I actually don't have a doubt that he should be Scotland's number 8. The problem you have is you've got Haining, you've got Bradbury, and these like, for example, Magnus Bradbury. Okay, he's been sent home from the squad today or yesterday. He has been very, very good for Edinburgh, and he's been one of the people that's keeping Nick Haining off the team sheet at 8 now and then as well. So when he goes to Scotland, he doesn't perform, whereas Matt Ferguson gives you that performance all the way through URC and international, and Nick Haining slightly similar. When it comes to Scotland, he plays very, very well, but when he plays for Edinburgh, sometimes you'll have, again, as you've said, he'll have a good game and then he'll have a bad couple of games, and so it's just it's a seesaw on that one.
It's interesting, isn't it, the Bradbury one? Because again, as you rightly say, Craig, he started the season relatively well for Edinburgh. But yet again, he's went into international camp, and yet again, he's been sent home with no game time.
You think some of the some of the better Scotland games that we've had over the last few years have probably featured Bradbury on form.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. There's the rub of it. But Magnus Bradbury has you look at that game, the 2019 Calcutta Cup, the draw.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 2019? The draw.
Yeah.
Bradbury had an outstanding game, and that you look at that game, you say they're Scotland's number 8 for the next 10 years. But he dropped his form, then just dropped off a cliff.
It's a consistency thing. All these guys. As a lot of people, like when I saw criticisms of Ferguson, we have to remember it's like the first couple of times he got capped for Scotland, he got injured within about 15 minutes. So he was never, he took a wee while to actually, play more than 20 minutes without his ankle giving him jip or something like that. But I see him week in, week out at Glasgow, but more importantly, it was when he was coming up against top class European opposition. Your likes of Exeter. I'm not going to say their second name, and what have you. He put in some absolutely barnstorming performances.
Yeah.
And he is only 23. It's worth remembering that as well.
Yeah, because when he broke into the team, like Gregor Townsend said, he was still at Glasgow. Townsend, he was like, we still don't know what positions could be his best, because he might take a growth spurt and end up being 6'5" or something.
They were thinking he was still growing, but potentially be a lock.
Yeah.
But I've seen the he's too wee to be an international number 8 argument. It's like, sorry, but we're not all criticising other people for saying that about the mighty Mish. And you've got like the likes of CJ Stander, who's not the tallest, biggest guy, right? He's barrel chested, but not particularly tall. Sam Simmons, he's about the same weight. So it's just, body shapes are changing. We were talking about the locks earlier. It depends on how you want to play. In Scotland, want to play fast and quick. And what you'll get from Ferguson is work rate round the park.
He's 6'1", though. He's 6'1" and 17 stone, right?
He's a big lad.
He's a big lad. That's big. That's a good size for an international.
Everybody's
eight.
they're all thinking that you should be like Billy Vunipola size, sort of thing. But then, you look what Billy
Well,
Vunipola's
he
injury
gets too
record is
big,
like.
and he gets too big sometimes. For the Pola.
Look
we
at the
can't-
way Scotland are playing. The way they're using their 8. There's the stat about we don't score tries from 8, which is fine. We're obviously using our 8 as a defensive, getting through work rate. We're using them as that kind of link man of just absolutely you're carry, churn, tackle. And you need a fit boy to do that. You're not going to get, like Vunipola would be 20 minutes in crying for some ice cream at that point.
Sorry, I'm going.
No, it's just a quick stat here. When Johnny Gray made that the 42 tackle game against Leinster?
Yeah.
What people don't realise, Matt Fagerson made 34, but you
right.
also put him in the top 5 of tackles made in a Pro 14 match all time. I know that's.
And then you've got the stats of Rob Harley's penalties. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
So,
look, let's move on. Let's move. Let's move on.
Rob Harley's job.
I know. Rob Harley's job
lying on the wrong side of the rock.
My theory with that is that Gregor Townsend said, "Look, lads, we need to have a trial of playing with 14 players. How can we do that? We'll bring Rob Harley into the squad. We'll definitely have a time period playing with 10 minutes if Rob's.
We want to run some defensive
Big Bob
drills.
starting.
Let's get Big Bob.
We just see how we'll do with 14 men for a bit. The backs then, right? So, right, Johnny's not here, so I'm gonna have to change the rules there. I want to talk about Blair Kinghorn, right? Because it's impossible to have a nuanced discussion about Scottish fly halves anymore. Apparently, Johnny's here.
Just arrived.
Johnny heard. This is like Candyman. Basically, I said Blair Kinghorn and Johnny McGinty arrived. That's what's happened. After me, you and I, Johnny, had a discussion about Blair Kinghorn, and I believe I haven't listened back to last week's podcast. When some of the reaction on Twitter, I thought, did I insult Blair Kinghorn's mother somehow and not remember?
I thought the same thing.
And you listen back, and we said he was good.
Yeah.
But you doubled down on Twitter, though, Johnny. That's the thing, though. It's like I'd see the point if you have a nice nuanced discussion on the pod, and then on Twitter you just go off on one.
That's not Johnny. He was provoked. Right, wait a minute, though. I'm going. Before anyone starts, we need balance on this podcast. I might pick this up on Patreon, but we're going to have balance in this podcast if nothing else. So I'm going to give everybody 1 minute each of Johnny, John, and Ian to tell me what they thought of Blair Kinghorn. Craig then gets 3 minutes if he wants it. I get as long as I want because 1, I run the podcast, and 2, I really don't care either way about Glasgow Ember players. So, Johnny, we're going to start with you. I've got my timer out. You've got 1 minute. How did Blair Kinghorn get on at fly half?
He was fine. I expected him to be fine, and he was fine. And the thing is, that I don't understand is there's no problem with being fine. Probably 35 boys of the 50 and of the 40 in the squad are fine. Fine is all right. I have no problem with it. That's why I expect him to be. I don't understand why everyone thinks he's going to be any better than fine. Fine is what he is as an international player, and that's what he was on Saturday.
Right, that's fine. That was 27 seconds. Nobody gets extra time, though, because of that. I'm not
time?
passing it on. No, it doesn't carry over. John, Blair Kinghorn.
Distinctly average, boring, done some decent things, done some very poor things, missed kicks at goal. Again, if Finn had kicked 3 out of 7, he would have been lynched by the fans. So, 3 out of 7, it was only Tonga. I thought he stood up quite well physically. He also got away with a very cheap shot on one of the Tongan boys. So, just a really mixed bag, but he's an emergency option at 10 for Scotland, and I wouldn't ever imagine he'll be anywhere beyond that anytime soon.
Fine,
that was under a minute. Well done, John. Ian.
Right. So first of all, see the he jumped out the line a wee bit for the Tongan Lucid props break. But his defensive qualities have been criticised, not only by me, but by Chris Patterson and all sorts as well. Other than that, I thought his restarts were exceptional. He gets so much height on the ball, it gave Kyle Steyn and Jamie Ritchie plenty to chase. His pass out to McLean was nice and accurate. But we'll talk about McLean later because oofed. His cross kick for Staines' hat-trick try. He got a wee bit lucky with the bounce, but it was it's a sensible kick. I thought he kicked his penalties from hand going to touch. He got he's got a fair length of boot on him. He did that well. He was pretty good. But he's not going to be 10. I mean, Mike Blair's only just said a couple of weeks ago that he sees him as a viable option, and that's because Edinburgh are bereft there because Jorrell Lance didn't get his sport permit last year. Am I over time yet?
No, you've got 10 seconds.
All right. He nearly got an intercept pass, but he played well. I prefer him from further back because he can run from deep.
I'm muting you now. Your time's up. Craig, Blair Kinghorn.
Blair Kinghorn. I agree with some of the things that have been said. I think Blair is a combination of three players. They've brought him into 10. They've given him he plays on the wing and he plays fullback. I disagree with John because I think he will be seen on the bench for Scotland because we're going to probably be playing a 6-2 split, especially against South Africa, and we're going to need cover for wing, 10, and fullback. I think to turn a couple of John's points over, if Finn Russell did something naughty, it was never discussed as a cheap shot. Let me think, tripped someone up while they were running through and got sent off. Also, if we were just playing Tonga, but if Finn Russell threw that pass to Rufus McLean or kicked that ball across to Kyle Steyn, there would be replays on Twitter and people would be absolutely watching it and doing something to themselves while they were watching it for regular. So on my side of things, I think it's yes, I agree. Blair Kinghorn has been for some time a work in progress. What I think he did on the weekend was he took control of that back line and he worked the back line, did everything that he was asked to do apart from his kicks. And I think, fair enough, his kicking was awful from the tee, but his kicking from hand and his kick from restarts was very, very good. So I think it's one of those things. He'll never be our first start 10 unless we've not got anybody, we've not got Finn Russell and we've not got Adam Hastings. But on my side of things, I think he did it a lot better than many other West Coast fans would probably say he is. I think he's a great Edinburgh player and we're really happy to have him.
That's fine. You've got a minute left, Craig. Are you happy with that?
I've got a minute left. I'm happy with that. I don't disagree with a lot of things that have been said. I think there's been a lot of people have been stating the fact that it was just Tonga, and I've just stated it when it comes to when we started talking about Tonga. But everyone's going nuts about Kyle Steyn, and look at Kyle Steyn. Isn't he phenomenal? Yeah, but it's just Tonga, and it was a really, really, really low side of Tonga who'd scraped. If you're walking down Princess Street in a Tonga jersey, you'd probably be starting on the weekend. So, we can't be quick to judge on that game.
Yeah, that's fine. Right, my tuppence worth. It was fine. I thought the problem is, and I've always thought, is that Blair Kinghorn shows immense promise, and it's accuracy and mentality. And if they can find a way of sorting that out with him, particularly his decision making, he could be very good. He could even be exceptional because he has all the skills. I don't doubt he's got the skills. He can pass off both hands. I think some of his decision making, some of his defensive work needs things, but it's all fixable. It's just whether or not he's teachable in those things, if that makes sense. Because some of the, he threw too many missed passes that gave the Tongan defence too much time to come up. And there was a couple of hospital passes where the guys he was passing to got absolutely smashed because the defence had too much time to come up. When Ross Thompson came on, and now this is what we don't know. I don't know whether Ross Thompson's just given different instructions because you can never tell. We don't know what's said at the coach, but Ross Thompson was passing to the man outside or inside of him much more rather than going for the long missed passes. Now, whether that's been an instruction from the coaches to do that, or whether or not that Ross Thompson's just not trying to overplay it and throw the missed pass all the time, I don't know. But I thought sometimes Blair Kinghorn maybe left his other backs exposed a little bit. But these are all, none of this is the kind of, the fumbling, the kind of coming out the defensive line. None of it is a kind of a fundamental lack of skills. And that's probably where I think, and you've said yourself, Craig, it's probably where Blair Kinghorn has been for Scotland, and maybe a little bit for Edinburgh for the last few years. Is he's not lacking the skills to be an exceptional rugby player. But there's work to be done, and he's only 24, and it's all fixable. And actually, looking at it, isn't it great? I think it was only last year on the podcast, that we were saying you got Finn Russell, Adam Hastings, and then who? Jaco van der Walt, who can come in, and but he had to be babysat through that entire Island match by Stuart Hogg. And there's no getting away from that. So it was a year ago we're talking about there's nobody below Adam Hastings, and we're in real trouble. We're basically looking at Stuart Hogg or nobody if that happens. And now we're in a position where actually you go, for me, it's Finn Russell, Adam Hastings, and then either Blair Kinghorn or Ross Thompson. And looking at what happened at the weekend, I can kind of understand why Blair Kinghorn started, because, as you say, Craig, you're not going to put Ross Thompson on the bench against Australia and South Africa, but Blair Kinghorn has caps. He's got international caps. He's got experience, so he makes the bench, and he's played 10 now, and so he offers decent cover.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think my only concern about Blair Kinghorn, and it has been for some time, is that I think he's got a similar attitude to Finn Russell, in that nothing phases him, or he looks outwardly like nothing phases him, but things actually phase him. Whereas Finn Russell does not give. He just goes, right, I've done something wrong there. I've thrown an intercept try. Damn it, right, what's next? Whereas I think Blair is one of those players that kind of feeds off the crowd and feeds off his own. If he does something good, then the minute he kicks a ball, he kicks to try to get into the five. Kicks a ball into touch from a penalty and he misses touch, then that chips away at him. And then it chips it, but outwardly he's all yeah, smiling at everybody. I'm happy-go-lucky, but actually it's chipping away at him inside. So I think he just, I think it'll be an interesting autumn nations. But one thing I will say is that the Tonga match, what we have seen is we've seen something different from Blair Kinghorn, and something that could make him, if we are talking about Scotland squads in the next 20 years' time, we'll be saying, we had Blair Kinghorn as well, who could play in 3-4 different positions, and he worked well for Scotland, and he got 50 caps.
Yeah.
The Scottish Jody Barrett.
Yeah.
Should we mention in the backs? I mean, Kyle Stainer, obviously got man of the match, but I think Rufus McLean's probably the one we want to talk about. Johnny, that was an exceptional debut, even given the opposition for someone so young.
Yeah, I mean, Tonga or no Tonga, there is still a difference when it comes to playing Test rugby to playing club rugby. And you could see that. I could see, like, where we were sitting was not the best view, but it was all right. And a couple of the debutants you could see were sort of a little bit slow. Would be like looking around momentarily at the breakdown for where they were meant to go. And I saw a couple of them getting pushed around, dragged around. Rufus McLean looked like he'd been doing that for years, like slotted straight in. Didn't really see him have any of that kind of problem, was up to speed from the word go, and looks like he's more than ready for international rugby. So,
and he's a bit like Darcy as well, Craig. I mean, because Darcy was smashing his rucks as normal, despite he's only like 5 foot nothing and weighs like a carrier bag. And Rufus McLean's got that as well, as for small wingers and fullbacks, they can hit big guys quite hard when they want to.
Oh yeah, Darcy's always been a very, very strong he looks almost too strong for how his size to strength proportion is quite is off. You don't expect someone that that small to be so strong. But I think Darcy suffered from a bit of oh my God, what am I going to have to deal with in the 1872 Cup? Seeing Walter Fafita just running down the wing towards him, and he got smashed 2 or 3 times. And I thought, yeah, I hope Darcy's.
But he did enough. I think the thing is, but he did enough. He did enough to put him off his stride and just give him enough of a knock so that the next guy covering.
Yeah,
I mean, it'd be no good if that was on the try line. But
it was the first one that happened where it was quite early on in Fafita got loose, smashed Graham, smashed Kinghorn, and then it was just like, there's just bodies strewing everywhere, and he's kind of just tripping over people at this point. It was magnificent. Loved it.
But yeah, I think the only problem you have though is again, who do you not start on the weekend to give Rufus McLean his start? Because the back three is a you've got a British and Irish Lion, you've got another British and Irish Lion, and you've got Darcy Graham, who I feel should be a British and Irish Lion. So it's I would say you're probably going to see Van der Merwe, you're going to see Hogg, and you're going to see Darcy Graham starting. So has he done enough to move one of them off the wing?
I think he comes back in for Japan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I think you're right. I think, I don't. I actually struggle, John. I would say I would struggle to see Kyle Steyn making the squad at the weekend.
I was going to jump in with I respected Craig's 3 minutes with the talking baton when he was making his riposte to us, and I respected that completely. I am certainly not one of these people who's been sitting saying Kyle Steyn is now the greatest thing in the world ever. He scored 4 tries against a scratch side. Brilliant, right? Cool. He got the beers in afterwards. That's excellent. Well done to him. I think he didn't let anyone down. He done what he does well. His kick chase was good. But is he as good as Darcy Graham? Is he as good as Duhan? No, he's absolutely not. He's another option in the back three if we happen to get a few injuries. But he's certainly not, the new world class winger that we've been crying out for. I think McLean, actually, for me, it's interesting because McLean, despite the fact he didn't score 4 tries, I thought McLean was much more interesting than Steyn. He certainly, on hand particularly. Oh, he was just every time he gets the ball, you're waiting for that step, and it's the second try he scored. That's honestly, you could watch. I mean, I'll be honest. I have sat and watched it for like consecutive periods of time, just over and over, and it is dirty. But agreed, you don't throw guys necessarily into these, fixtures against Australia, fixtures against South Africa. I think there's no doubt McLean could cope with it, but I don't think he will be called on to do it. I think he'll be back for Japan, and that's fine. I think on the positive side, we've went from just a couple of years ago suggesting that we had Tommy Seymour coming to the end of his career. We had, we didn't have Duhan. With Darcy Graham kind of breaking through at that point. Kinghorn was being used on the wing. We had Maitland kind of coming to the end of, his career as well a wee bit. We were quite short in back three options. And now we're probably, a bit better stacked. We're certainly not well stacked, but we're a bit better stacked.
Yeah.
And another person who can play back three but was released from the squad, Cole Forbes.
Yeah.
One thing with Steyn can play 13 as well. I remember I actually said I wanted him at 13 at Warriors, probably because I didn't like the other options more than anything.
You didn't like Nick.
Yeah, pretty much. But Rufus McLean, I mean, even from that first try, see just that ridiculous pace. I mean, it is just the acceleration, and for the step, you can see it's like he's got kangaroo feet. He just bounces off. And there's no when he turns to change direction, there's like no deceleration.
No, he was getting faster as he was going.
He is just raw pace. I remember a couple of years ago, somebody on Scottish Rugby Forum, they'd said they know somebody in Scottish rugby camp. They're like, guess who the fastest player in the camp is? And they said it was Kinghorn. He was slightly faster than Hogg. I think it was over 60 metres.
Yep.
If Rufus McLean isn't the fastest guy in that squad now, I will be absolutely amazed, because not even just his 2 tries. The one for Staines' hat-trick when we had penalty advantage our own line, and he just zoomed in the left wing.
Yeah.
Darcy took it on. Kinghorn did that clever kick, cross kick. I mean, you cannot defend pace like that. No, that's one thing that scares the hell out of people. Is just searing raw pace, and he has that in abundance. Obviously, I'm a big Doohan fan because he has maybe not quite that much pace, but it's not a lot less, and just incredible brute strength. So yeah, he can't drop Doohan. But McLean is certainly an interesting one to watch.
There's a question here from Martin Bell says, does this mean that Maitland has played his last test? I think
so.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
Unless break glass in case of emergency.
I think if we go 6-2 on Saturday, that it's Kinghorn that makes the bench, and if we go 5-3, it might well be Stain instead of Kinghorn. I see Stain and Hastings if it was a 5-3, and Kinghorn if it's a 6-2.
Yeah,
just purely because, like Ian says, Stain is a solid 13 as well, so he's an option for centre or back 3 if we've got a 10 on the bench. If we don't, then Kinghorn's got to do sort of 10, 11, 14, 15.
I think we'll go 5-3 on Saturday. I think South Africa we might go 6-2, but I think we'll go 5-3.
Yeah, we'll be 6-2 against South Africa, but I do agree with you on that one that we could probably see 5-3. What I will say, and I will say in levels of balance, I wasn't necessarily saying that Stain was rubbish on the weekend. Anyone that can score 4 international tries on coming back from some horrendous injuries, you got to remember that Kyle Stain got his debut 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So to come back and do something like he did, he's done a fantastic job, and I certainly, just as we've just discussed, if we're sitting there if we don't have what I would say are our first choice back 3, he has got a very, very good chance to win. But I agree with Johnny, bring him at the centre. The times that I've seen Nick Grigg in a Scotland shirt, I would probably prefer to see Kyle Stain.
Speaking of centres, very briefly,
Nick Grigg in a Glasgow shirt, I prefer.
very briefly before we go this week for our non-Patreon listeners. Speaking of centres, Sione Tuipulotu, I thought had a good game. I thought kind of seemed to have slipped below the radar, and he was involved a lot with the setup for the tries. He almost got a turnover. I thought he carried well. I think. I'm not all of a sudden decreeing that he's going to be the next 13 for Scotland, because I don't think he's there yet, but he's certainly up to standard, Ian.
Yeah, he looks a hell of a prospect. He can play wing as well. Strong, fast. But we haven't seen a great deal of him. But obviously, Townsend must rate him highly if he brings him in that quickly. But no, he was very solid. He does look like a player. He looks like a baller, as we say. But the thing we are now having these options at club level and international level. I mean, the recruitment over the summer for Glasgow, I think, has been excellent. And we still see Josh Mackay coming in, who by all accounts looks like an incredible player. So exciting things ahead, hopefully.
You could sell tickets alone for the Josh Mackay Rufus McLean race. and get a cheetah involved as well.
That's why they've got a running track around Scotstoun.
They're going to get a cheetah like they did with Brian Habana that time. Or in Brazil. What's the fastest animal you got?
It was a wee shame for Habana as well, because obviously it's like, racing a cheetah, and then in the 2007 World Cup he gets absolutely smoked by the USA winger, absolutely put out to pasture. Sit down, son, you ain't no cheetah. It was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, we're going to say goodbye to our. Ian has a point of order.
One last little bit of news. Did you see that the Welsh Rugby Union have said they are going to offer 10 professional contracts to women players?
Yep.
And I think there's going to be another bunch on sort of semi-pro contracts.
I was going to ask if we'd discussed that before I was here, because that's great.
We haven't. I tell you what, that's great news. Scotland should do it. Let's have a rant about it in the Patreon podcast.
Let's
stick a pin in that. But we'll say publicly, Scotland should follow suit. I think that also New Zealand have issued 105 professional contracts to women's players because they've set up a whole tournament. So
There we go.
the SRU are going to have to do something to keep up.
Get a
Your
finger out.
move, SRU.
Yeah. So anyway, that for this week for our non-Patreon listeners, we'll say bid you farewell. We'll be back on Friday lunchtime with our Australia and Australia Scotland preview podcast, hopefully with some special guests. Apart from that, we'll be back next week with our review. But for the moment, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Johnny, John, Craig, and Ian.
Bye.
Ciao.
Goodbye.
Right, see if I can do this quickly now. I just need to make sure I'm removing the right ones.